What would you do if you found yourself to be the victim to the one thing that you were fighting against? My name's Adrian and welcome back to Coffee House Crime. Today we're looking at the case of Karabo Mokoena, who, through smoke and mirrors, found herself in the grasp of an evil narcissist. Today's case takes us all the way down to sunny Johannesburg in South Africa, and while the country may be home to beautiful weather, incredible countryside and vibrant culture, it's also home to this story. Not so beautiful. So grab a coffee and sit back. This is the case of Karabo Mokoena. Johannesburg. Originally an offshoot of the Zulu kingdom, Johannesburg found its way to rapid growth through the beginning of the gold rush in June 1884. There's a lot of difficult history here, but over a century later, the city is now home to over 5 million residents. And even though the gold has long disappeared around the grounds from Johannesburg, it is now considered to be the economic and financial hub of the country. Nestled to the southwest of the city's central business district lies Diepkloof, a large zone in the Soweto township of Johannesburg. And one of those residents to Diepkloof, her name was Karabo Mokoena. She was born on March the 27th, 1995, to a mother Lorraine known as Lolo and her father Mugregne. Growing up, Karabo was close to her family. Her parents, her younger brother and older sister often leaned on each other for support. Her older sister Bontley and Karabo still shared a room in the family home. Karabo was known to be a thoughtful and loving person. Those that knew her described her to have a loving, generous heart, and she was considerate towards everyone that she met. And while Karabo was a nurturing individual, she was smart too. Following her graduation at Hill High School in 2014, she enrolled into Regenesis Business School to begin her tertiary education in business studies. It was during her part-time studying at Regenesis Business School that she went on to obtain her aviation license from the AAFSA. To go with her education and kindness, Karabo was also very passionate over both women's and children's rights. Although a glaring problem all over the world, Johannesburg is particularly archaic when it comes to the welfare for women and children. It was for this reason that she had a calling. She often volunteered at Frida Hartley's shelter. It was there that she would provide talks and speeches to women who were in abusive relationships to educate and empower them and leave.
You will never amount to anything, you're very right. No one can even confuse you because these are the words that you are confessing. It's the law of attraction. I'll sit here and say I want a very tall...
Karabo was very passionate about women's rights, and given the city's statistics, rightfully so. She was so passionate in fact that she envisioned in the future to raise and develop an NGO, a non-governmental organisation or a charity, around this. It was during this time, while she was still at Regenesis Business School in October 2016, that she met a man named Sandile Mantsoe. Sandile Mantsoe was a forex trader in the city. Originally from Mbelanle, he attended school in Secunda, a town in the coalfields east of Johannesburg. He went on to study graphics design, but now in the present time, Sandile, he was 29. From the outside, Sandile was a very likeable character. He was charismatic, a very religious man, a very wealthy man, and he was single. He had 3 children, but now he was estranged from his wife and kids. Sandile's religion spoke for itself. He appeared to have morals, and the reason to his apparent wealth was from finding success in creating his own binary options trading company, suitably named $1 Trillion Legacy.
But anyway, today we are talking about trade psychology. How do we at $1 Trillion Legacy approach trade psychology? You can Google trade psychology and read what they say, but this is our take on trade psychology. Whenever you come to the forex or binary market or stock market, your ultimate objective is one. And what is that objective, Steve?
With thanks to his business and his morals, Sandile, he really was hard on the money. From casually wearing Gucci to owning a gold BMW and a limited edition Mercedes-Benz, all the way through to living into Sandton Sky apartment complex, he quite literally was living the high life.
Man, when times are tough, friends are few, man. I've been having a tough time in my life, but my boys pulled through, man, to come and give me some encouragement. And this is it, another M5, this is it, right there, an AMG right there, ra 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 ra, ra 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 ra.
Maybe a little too much for his ego though. He would supposedly make money from his trades while also offering one-day classes to people interested in forex trading, charging them around 6,000 rand or £300 or $400 for the day. It was for these reasons, along with the infectious personality of course, that Karabo grew closer to Sandile. She saw the good morals in him, and the money was a good bonus too. The two of them grew closer almost immediately, and before anyone knew it, the two were in a relationship. Sandile, he loved Karabo's strong personality, and Karabo, she loved almost everything about him. The two really did seem like a powerful couple from the outside. It was 1 month into the relationship, in November 2016, that Karabo left her family home to move in with Sandile in his Sky apartment. But almost straight away, the relationship started to become turbulent. Sandile, he wasn't quite the man that he portrayed himself to be. And Karabo, she would find herself in the hands of the evil that she preached against at the shelters. It was shortly before Christmas of 2016 that the first signs of domestic violence began to appear. Karabo reported to her friends that in an argument, Sandile smashed her phone after pushing her into a wall. And 3 months later, in March 2017, that violence intensified. It was by this time that she was sending friends pictures of her bruises, leaving them messages describing his attacks on her, and revealing the emotional abuse that Sandile would spit at her. It was a dark and twisted irony. Karabo, she herself was an advocate fighting for women in abusive relationships, yet here she was in one herself. A situation she often empowered and encouraged women to leave, she now couldn't force herself out of. It was March the 27th, 2017 though, Karabo's birthday, that the abuse really started to split the relationship apart. In the early morning hours of Karabo's birthday, friends and family tried to contact her to wish her happy birthday. They weren't able to get through to her, and the reason for this was that she was in hospital. Later in the morning, she eventually called her family to let them know where she was. Sandile, he had smashed her phone yet again, this time entirely breaking it. Karabo explained to her mother that he had beaten her. She had marks on her arms, on her neck, and she had a black eye. It was at this stage that she reluctantly submitted a charge of assault against Sandile to law enforcement. But when she would arrive at the police station, much to her surprise, she'd find out that Sandile had been there earlier that morning. In fact, he had submitted a charge of assault against her. What? Karabo left Sandile that day. Finally, she had realised how much of a monster the man was. She moved back in with her parents and her sister and her brother. Now I wish I could say that the story ended here. Karabo, she'd already tolerated way more than anyone should in an abusive relationship. And while she was free for now, unfortunately that wouldn't last. Two weeks had passed since Karabo's birthday, and it was now mid-April. By now, police had shrugged off the charges both from Sandile and Karabo. They explained that they had no time to deal through lovers' quarrels. Very understandably, Karabo was annoyed by this, but at least the marks on her skin were fading, and she was adamant to move on with her life. That's why that evening, she found herself with her girlfriends down at a local nightclub in Sandton. The night started out just fine. The women, they were hitting their drinks while music played on around them. But it wasn't long until our God-loving, money-burning saint Sandile appeared. He too was having a night out with the lads. It was his neck of the woods anyway, the nightclub only a couple blocks away from his apartment. Despite Karabo's friends telling her to stop talking to Sandile, it was too late to stop her. The two started talking again, eventually slipping back into their old habits. On April the 27th, 2018, Karabo called her mother Lolo to let her know that she was going out with Sandile later that evening. And, much to Lolo's rejection, she also said that she may be staying at Sandile's that night in his apartment. And this is a fatal mistake to the story, because she did go out with Sandile that night. While they were out together, again at a Sandton nightclub, drinks and old feelings evolved into a heated argument between the two. And, old habits die hard, the argument escalated into a physical fight. The two seemed to settle at least the physical aspects of the fighting, but it was pretty obvious that there was still tension between the two. It's not actually known why, but Karabo, she still left the club with Sandile, even going back with him to his apartment. CCTV captured her with Sandile entering the lobby of his Sky apartment at 2:48 AM in the morning of April the 28th. During the entire recording, no word was spoken between the two, the expression of upset feelings and dissatisfaction very clear on Karabo's face. And you can probably guess where this is going, because this CCTV footage would be the last time that Karabo is seen alive, ever. April the 28th. It was the next morning. Karabo's mother, she was growing concerned. She had tried calling her phone a couple times, but her daughter wasn't picking up. Her text messages remained unanswered too. They spoke briefly the night before, but Karabo, she whispered that she couldn't talk right now. Things didn't feel right, and noticing her silence since last night, she knew something was wrong. Lolo called Sandile, asking him where Karabo was. Sandile, he seemed surprised when he heard Lolo. He had no idea. Apparently, Karabo had left the night before. In the meantime, Karabo's sister Bontley, she went down to Sandtone Sky Building, and when she got there she asked staff if they'd seen Karabo at all. The answer was no, but they did admit to finding something. One of the cleaners to the building found Karabo's ID and passport in the trash. The trash was in a bin bag, that bin bag in the room next to the elevator. This discovery raised concerns for Karabo's family, but despite this, nothing else came forward for the remaining day. Karabo's family reported her missing to the police. It's unknown why, but the process took police over 2 days to complete, and their actions on the case were slow. It would be the social media campaigning by Karabo's friends that really picked up publicity to the case. On April the 29th, Lolo, who now hadn't slept for 2 days, called Sandile again. She asked him where Karabo was and what he'd done to her. She didn't suggest anything about him murdering her, but his response was very strange. He responded to her with,
"I don't know where Karabo is, but I didn't kill her."
Now if that isn't sus, I don't know what is. Sandile's friends who visited him in his apartment also noticed an unusually large wet patch of carpet by his kitchen area. He brushed it off, saying that his fridge had broken and leaked onto the carpet. By the time police had eventually caught up to the case, it was now April the 30th, 3 days after Karabo went missing. And since police were now keen to interview Sandile, Lolo, she joined them to his apartment. By the time they got there though, he was nowhere to be seen. Upon calling his mobile, Sandile answered. He said to police that the earliest he could get there would be late that afternoon, he was out of town. So police and Lolo, they waited. While waiting for his return, police would go to the building's staff and ask for CCTV footage. They would comply, giving them surveillance footage of what was over the elevators. This became vital evidence, as later they would discover that the day after Karabo disappeared at 9:57 PM on the 28th of April, Sandile collected a wheelie bin, and he moved this wheelie bin to his apartment. At 10:07 PM, just 10 minutes later, he then moved the bin to the underground garage where he kept his car. And you can take a guess what was in that bin. At 10:29 PM, he drove out of his garage. So Sandile had initially told Karabo's family and friends that he believed Karabo had gone home that night. She didn't stay with him after clubbing. But now the story was different. He was telling police that he believed Karabo had taken a flight to London in the UK. This was a bad move, however, because not only had his first excuse been busted by the CCTV, his second excuse was busted too, the passport, it was found in the bin. They took Sandile in for questioning. Lolo followed police to the station in hopes for any news about her daughter. By this time of the day and this late in the process, she felt like nothing more than a husk of a human being. Numb and fragile and completely distraught at the disappearance of her daughter, with the glaring possibility that she may never see her again. It was only 1 hour into her waiting that Lolo was pulled to the side by another officer. She was taken into a nearby room, and there she was told the news that she never wanted to hear. Sandile Mantsoe had confirmed that Karabo was dead.
What up, guys? It's Sandile here again. Yeah, man. This week is gonna be a big week in trading.
Following his confession, multiple versions of events would come from Sandile, all of which, though, he would deny being responsible. He did admit to removing her body, however, before dumping it in a nearby area called Bramley, another district in Johannesburg just 7 kilometres away from Sandton. He would also take police to the location, but by then the body was gone, only the ditch located by a field showing signs of scorching. Sandile was formally arrested by police for the murder of Karabo Mokoena. It would take several days later, though, for police in the Bramley district to connect Mokoena's death to this site. Forensics would later be called to connect the dots, and in early May, DNA would confirm that the badly damaged remains belonged to Karabo. Back in the police cell, Sandile's story was also fast gaining turbulence. After police discovered Karabo's remains, not only did he deny to ever making any statements to police, but he also accused them of lying to try and pin him as the murder suspect. He would later change his story yet again. Apparently, after returning home from work on April the 28th, he found Karabo's body in his apartment, suggesting that she'd taken her own life. He was worried that people would pin this on him, so he disposed of the body. In the new 4th version, though, his story became more bizarre. He claimed that he and Karabo paired up in a blood ritual a few months ago. Apparently, this ritual would promise both great wealth and fortune to the two of them, but it had a caveat. Should they ever break up, one of them would need to die, and apparently, this is where Karabo decided that she would sacrifice herself for him. This man really is bonkers. Before his trial, Sandile Mantsoe was up against 3 charges, one for premeditated murder, one for defeating the ends of justice, and the other for assault with intent to cause harm. And despite his multiple stories, Sandile tried everything in his power to delay the trial. Not only that, but he slandered Karabo's name in the process. I won't tell you what about, because other than it being totally disrespectful, it's false. By the time his trial had come around, though, Sandile retracted his previous statements over the blood rituals. It was now back to his previous version of events. And as those trials commenced, the streets outside the court in which he was held would fill with protests. The outcry of violence against women could be heard in almost every room of the building. It was on day 3 that Sandile Mantsoe took the stand, and, as you'd expect with his narcissistic personality, he tried everything he could to paint himself in a positive light, telling listeners that the only thing he was guilty for was trying to help build a person.
I was a positive influence in her life. All these things about homes and stuff, I inspired her to start those things. I was the one who was helping her set up NGOs. I've had experience setting up NGOs. I tried to be a positive influence in her life, but it's unfortunate that I came into her life at a point where things were already bad. So yeah, maybe I'm guilty of trying to build a person and being the last one there when she collapsed, you know. So the truth of the matter is I tried my best.
During the trial, the judge, Johnson, asked for more elaboration and evidence into the CCTV footage that was given of Karabo and Sandile in his apartment complex's lobby. Experts from an unbiased party would analyse the footage and explain the chain of events to the jury, further confirming that even if Sandile had not been responsible for Karabo's death, he had plenty of time to inform police or staff. Instead, he would further cover up his tracks, deny his involvement, plant alibis, and attempt to explain Karabo's disappearance on a covert trip to London. And this sealed the fate to Sandile Mantsoe, because on Thursday the 3rd of May, 2018, Sandile was found guilty to Karabo Mokoena's death. He was sentenced to a total of 32 years in prison. The sentence included 5 years for assault, 30 years for murder, and 4 years for defeating the ends of justice. He was further deemed unfit for parole. Judge Johnson described Sandile as a devil in disguise with a cold heart, and he deserved nothing less than a harsh punishment.
The court cannot describe you in any other way than a devil in disguise. She did not deserve to perish at your hands in the way that she did. Your cold-heartedness towards the deceased is evident from your conduct after you killed her.
During his sentence, he wore a lavish suit and a heavy gold watch. almost acting like a celebrity, acting calm and collected as his verdict was read out, avoiding all responsibility he ought to have owed, maybe as if he really was the devil in disguise after all. It was evident through the crime, and in the aftermath, and even in the trial, that Sandile, he showed no guilt or remorse for anything that he had done. What also stood out to me in this case is the level of arrogance and narcissism that Sandile revealed. Not just in his crimes or after, but before too. His company and promotional videos, which are full of his own ego, were in fact a sham. During his trial, it was revealed that he was actually in debt by thousands of dollars. Over 100 individuals coming forward to say that they had been swindled from their money. And from the money he effectively stole, he purchased his apartment and his cars. All bought to inflate his own image and his own ego, even though his actual justified earnings were likely in the red. And while he played the facade of a God-loving do-gooder, behind closed doors he beat Karabo, progressing all the way through to that final chapter, her own death. Even after being caught, he showed no compassion, or sympathy, or remorse, or ownership, or guilt. And this case really brings up something that we should be actively questioning ourselves on a day-to-day basis. What are we doing to protect the women that are in abusive relationships? Sure, South Africa is one of the biggest offenders to this statistic, but almost every country is guilty. What are we doing about it? Like I said, this case has a very dark and twisted irony. Karabo, she was smart, she was nurturing, she had a business studies degree and an aviation license. But it was her kindness that pulled her towards looking after women and helping women in abusive relationships. And maybe it was her kindness that made her hold on to Sandile. In this twisted tragedy though, she became the victim to the thing that she was fighting against. Thank you so much for watching another case of mine today. I hope you enjoyed the video. And thank you Ole Maropa for suggesting this case. If you have any suggestions for Coffee House Crime, please feel free to drop it in a comment below. And while you're there, what do you think about the case of Karabo Mokoena and Sandile Mantsoe? Do you think that he got enough time for his crime? Thank you once more for joining me today, folks. I hope you have a good day. And I'll be seeing you real soon in the next one. Until then though, look after each other. Goodbye.